Good evening. This is Chase Glenn from the Alliance for Full Acceptance, and welcome. We are doing a live stream this evening with Dr. E. Patrick Johnson from Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois. I just rounded it up to Chicago. I think it's actually in a suburb, and we can talk to Dr. Johnson about those details later. But I'm so excited about tonight's program. We have typically been doing programs around lunchtime, but I felt like this needed its own space. It needed a chance to really showcase Dr. Johnson and the amazing talent that he is, and the opportunity we have here to share this with audiences far and wide. So thank you for the couple of folks who have already joined. I'm going to invite you, if you have joined and you'd like to share this, you can start a watch party. If you go onto our Facebook page, that's where you are already. There's a button there. You can start a watch party, and that way we can get the word out even further about this program that we have going on. So anyway, I'm taking my time here at the beginning so that we can get more and more people to join and be a part of this conversation tonight. So again, my name is Chase Glenn. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Full Acceptance, based here in Charleston, South Carolina. We are an LGBTQ advocacy organization. Our work really focuses around education and advocacy with policymakers and creating change here in our local community and region. This program that we're doing here tonight and the programs that we've started doing as we entered into this new normal of social distancing have really been about creating conversation and dialogue around topics related to the LGBTQ community. So we have always been about creating that dialogue and increasing the visibility around these conversations. And so tonight in this program is just another example of that type of work. So I want to make sure that we are going live. So I'm going to go out to my phone. Just hold please for just a moment. Reaching down, I'm coming back. And I want to just double check things on our end and make sure we are good to go. It looks like we are. So we're going to just double check here that everything looks good. If you are in here watching tonight's broadcast, go ahead and leave a comment for us, and that way we know we are good. Looks like we're good on my end. All right. Well, with that, I am going to take a moment and introduce our special guest this evening, Dr. E. Patrick Johnson. I'm going to open up my note on my phone here so that you are able to know everything you need to know about him. So Dr. Johnson is a professor of performance studies and African American studies at Northwestern University. Scholar and artist, Johnson performs nationally and internationally and has published widely in the areas of race, gender, sexuality, and performance. He's the author, editor, or co-editor of several award-winning books, including his most recent two, Black Queer Southern Women, An Oral History, and Honeypot, Black Southern Women Who Love Women. Johnson's performance work, dovetails with his written work. His staged reading, Pouring Tea, Black Gay Men in the South Tell Their Tales, is based on his book Sweet Tea, and has toured to over 100 college campuses from 2006 to the present, and his full-length stage play, Sweet Tea, the play, premiered in Chicago and toured to Austin, Texas, Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, Providence, Rhode Island, Durham, North Carolina, and the National Black Theater Festival. He's won numerous awards, and so we are extremely grateful to be able to host him here this evening. This is not my first time. Let's get Dr. Johnson on the screen here. There we are. You are up here with us right now. This is not my first time bringing Dr. Johnson to the area. We brought you here. I was trying to remember how long ago it was now. 3 or 4 years ago. Is that right? We came down for Charleston Pride Festival.
Yeah, I actually think it's been more like 5 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Where does time go? Well,
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. You're freezing.
Oh no, more technical issues. Okay, well, I'm going to try to get off the screen, and hopefully that will remove any of the issues. We can hear you, we can see you, and
Okay,
excited
good.
to hear from you this evening. So I'm going to step away and allow you to take it from here. Feel free to introduce yourself in a way that is better than what I've done, and we're excited to
Oh,
hear from
no.
you. Thank you so much. And I will say,
So,
I'm just going to go ahead and put this out here. If we do run into any other technical issues, I may jump in and I'll try to be as gentle as possible when I do it. But hopefully, we'll be smooth sailing from here on out.
absolutely. Thank you, Chase, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to share the stories of people that I've been talking to for a long time now. It started with Sweet Tea. I started conducting those interviews with Black gay men of the South starting in 2004. And then we know that the book Sweet Tea was published almost 12 years ago now. It's hard to believe, in 2008. And then, not to be left out, the women said, "When are you going to write our book? When are you going to tell our stories?" And so I embarked on collecting the stories of Black Southern women who love women in 2012. And that ended up being not one, but two books, Black Queer Southern Women and Honey Pot. And today I'm going to share stories from both books, from Sweet Tea and from Honey Pot, and then we can have a talk about them. So the first story I'm going to share is from Freddie. Freddie was born in Madison, Georgia in 1944, and still, Freddie is a wonderful storyteller and loves to talk about his life. He is now the oldest living um, man from Sweet Tea that I interviewed. Others have passed away, so he's still standing. He's a painter and still resides in Atlanta. And this interview was conducted in January in 2005. So I asked Freddie, how would you describe your childhood? Oh, God, it was awful. I was an unwanted child. I was an unexpected child and an unwanted child. Well, I'm the fifth child, but after four children, the doctors told my mother that she couldn't conceive any more children. Then I came along. So I was sort of a surprise in that regard. But my father's mother was a very strong figure in my father's life. And have you seen the movie Roots? You know how they held the baby up? I kind of used that analogy. My grandmother held me up and declared that none of her blood was in me, which meant that her son was not my father. So my father, being the weakling that he was, I think believed her. My mother's mother, my grandmother, lived here in Atlanta, and my mother would visit my grandmother in Atlanta. So my father's mother proclaimed that I was some, I won't use the N word, but that I was some man in Atlanta's child, that I was not, in fact, his child. And so that caused my grandmother and father to treat me differently. One of the more painful examples I can remember is my sister and I being out on the school ground of Bourbon Street Elementary School. It's no longer there, but it was one of the colored schools in Georgia. And us running out to the edge of the schoolyard and asking my father for a nickel. And he would pull out a handful of change and give my sister a nickel and wouldn't give me one, saying he didn't have any more. And I remember crying at that kind of thing. I think the most painful memory I have is that my father's cousin, AC. I do not know how that was spelled, but that's what they called him, cousin AC. And his wife's name was Major, and their last name was Talbot. Cousin Major said to my mother one day, now my mother's name was Annie, but everyone called her B. She said, B, why don't you give Freddie to me since Aunt Avy, whose name was Eve, but who they called Avy, and WS, my father. Now, my father's name was Washington Smithson Styles, but he was simply known by his initials, W.S. Anyway, she said, why don't you give Freddie to me since Aunt Navy and W.S. don't want him? With me standing there. And I remember starting to cry and hugging my mother around the legs, and I must have been very young because my mother was only 5'2" tall, and I came at just about her knee. So I was a very small child. And I remember crying and saying, Mama, are you going to give me away? And she said, no. And there were other things. But those are some of the more painful memories I have of early childhood in Madison, Georgia. Now, I've been in counseling and cried through all of this stuff. I have. I was in counseling from 1988 to 1995. I really didn't go to counseling to do individual work. My partner and I were having some problems, so we got into couples counseling. And after a couple of sessions or so, the counselor identified that each of us had our own stuff that we needed to work through. And so I was in there longer than him. And I don't know if it did him any good or not, because well, I don't want to say because I don't know if you know this or not, but counseling is a very scary process. You have to be able to, I think, open up those doors. And you also have to be able to, I think, admit or give up on what I call one of the prevalent myths in the Black community, this sainted mother myth. You kind of have to see her for who she is, that just because she's your mother, she's not a saint. You can still love her, but you have to kind of see her for who she is, or either of your parents for that matter. Because in many instances, both the mother and the father, where they can do no wrong, well, I keep saying but I don't know what your situation is. But when I was in school, if you wanted to get a fight out of somebody, you'd say something about their mama. And I don't know if that's true today or not. I suspect that it probably is. And everything you could say about someone's mama was probably true. But just the fact that you're saying something awful about someone's mother would get you a real fight. But if you're going into counseling, you have to kind of see these people for who they are and deal with the experiences that you had with them. Now, in high school, even in elementary school, there was one teacher in particular who would assign a girl to tell her anyone bothered me when she left the room. I later found out she was, in fact, a lesbian. She was a married lesbian. She had a husband and some children, but she was, in fact, a lesbian. And she would assign a girl to tell her. So along the way, I was kind of protected by people. In high school, there was always a bigger boy or someone who knew I needed protecting. And the bigger boys, I never had sex with any of them. They just had a sense that I needed protecting. And something else happened. When I was in 6th grade, some boys were bothering me, and the teacher kept us after school. And I would carry a single-edged razor blade in my pocket to sharpen my pencils. Because if I went to the pencil sharpener, someone would bother me. They would put a tack in my seat, do a little something, just a little kid harassment. So after we were kept after school, the boys were going to line up to beat me up because they said it was my fault that we were kept after school. And I would always say, in the sweetest little voice, because you see, I'm reasonably soft-spoken now, leave me alone. I'm minding my business. Don't bother me. And this boy ran up to hit me, and I cut him across the shoulder with my razor blade. And by that time, the teacher came back. She said, you boys better go home. The last thing I heard him say was, you're a mean little sissy. I'm going to have your ass locked up. So I went home. I didn't say anything to my mother. And bravely the next day, I went to school. And the same boy came up to me, and he had a hairline cut across his shoulder because I had cut through 2 or 3 layers of clothing. He said, you better be glad. I said, listen, do not bother. I keep telling you to leave me alone. I want to be left alone. I'm not bothering you. Don't bother me. And what always happens, if anyone ended up attacking me, they always ended up seeing some of their own blood because I would fight them or hit them with a sharp object, but they always ended up seeing some of their blood. So because I was so supple, there was no way that they could twist my arm and do anything that I couldn't get out of. And I could run if I had to run. The rumor spread. Don't bother him. He's a mean little sissy. And he's stronger than he looks. So that is Freddie. I love Freddie's story because it's such a heart-rendering story. You know, growing up believing that his mother didn't want him, um, and then finding other people like a teacher uh, who protected him, and then him also being scrappy and protecting himself from being bullied. So I just love his resilience. The next story I'm going to share is from Michael. Michael is from Raleigh, North Carolina. He was born in 1968. And Michael is very proper and very articulate. In fact, he over enunciates everything. Although it's a funny accent because of his Eastern North Carolina upbringing. You have an over articulate accent, and also he has a verbal tick that you'll discover when I start to perform him. But this story of Michael's is about coming out, and it's really humorous, and it involves hair. This interview took place in October of 2004. Are you out to your family? Everybody in my family knows, in my immediate family in particular, all my aunts and uncles know, my grandmothers know. It was not easy for me. What were their reactions? Very mixed. For example, when I had this 21st birthday party, my father was the first person to ever say, he pulled me to the side, he told me happy birthday, he gave me money or whatever. He said, someone said X is gay, this guy I've been talking to. I said, really? He said, people will say cruel things. And that was it. And then I had friends who would call the house or whatever. My brother, who was in high school or junior high, would say, Michael, some fags on the phone for you. And I would say, give me that phone, boy, and whatever. And my mother's sorors would call. I'd see them at the mall. And before I could get home, my mother would say, well, Michael, such and such called and said that they saw you with these gay boys. You were running around at the mall with these gay boys. And I would just laugh and go on or whatever. But I think the straw that broke the camel's back was when I was modeling for this major boutique store here and moved from that one to where my cousin does hair. And I had this high top fade thing, and she asked me to do this hair show. And I said, yeah. She said, you gonna let me perm your hair? I said, girl, do whatever you're going to do as long as you're going to pay me. Well, after it permed, it fell down to here, and it was this pretty long bang. And she said, that's so pretty. Because, all this was cut off, and then I had this big slope spine. So she curled it, and she cut it, and she curled the spine. And I went home to my parents, and my father was doing the hedges. And I just never pay any attention to my father. I really don't. And I'm going up the steps. And my father grabs me by my bang and starts trying to cut my bang with the hedge clippers. And I'm just hollering like a little girl, Daddy, what are you doing? You're messing up my hair. And my mother comes out. She says, leave him alone. And it ended or whatever. But you know me, I go right back to the salon, get my hair done again. So, I never paid any attention to what people said, I just always felt very confident about myself. And the gay issue never bothered me, but you better not say anything to me about it, People have always been afraid to approach me about whether I'm gay or not. They may think whatever, but they're not going to say anything. So I love that story because Michael's such like Fred, such a wonderful storyteller, and I just have this wonderful image of him with this permed bang, or as he said, bang, going home to his parents for the first time, and his father trying to cut the bang with the hedge clippers. So now we're going to move on to share some stories from some of the women. Um, One of the wonderful things that happened in interviewing the women was all of, again, great storytellers, and also how much I was welcomed into their homes. And the narrative I'm about to share with you is from one of my favorite people from those interviews, Darlene. Darlene was born in 1961 in uh, a little town in Arkansas called Fordyce. And as she says, it's pronounced by the people who live there as Fordyce. She has a big personality. She's an activist now in Atlanta. Um, and she, unlike many of the other women that I interviewed, is still very connected to Protestant religion. Many of the other women that I interviewed, actually, whether they grew up in a Baptist or Methodist or Kojic church, they had since left uh, Protestant religion and are practicing other forms of religion, but not Charlene. And she also is very invested in music because she was a minister of music at several churches and a piano player and so on. And I love this story. So her story is about religion, but also a kind of coming out as well. As long as I've been a husband, I've been in church. That's all my life. I love church. I still love church. I love the singing. I love the hymns. I love the hymns now. Back then, I just love the singing. So it ain't a scripture that you can put out there that I don't know because I understand that thing. I think I understand it real good. I really do. I think I'm pretty good. As a matter of fact, my line name when I played Zeta Phi Beta was the Revelator. I could see things, or so I thought. I was able to look forward in time and predict. And with my friends, it was this big running joke all the time. But you know, every time the Revelator said something, it almost came to pass. So I want you to understand that never really was a closet that I was in. It was more of an awareness that had to come about. Or, I thank God how things have progressed in my life and how they have evolved. Yeah, maybe that's a better word for how they have it evolved. Because I got my teachings first in the church. So when this stuff came out about Leviticus and man not laying with man, I had to take it into the context in which it was taught to me. This was the Old Testament. These are the things that they had in place. Christ came not to do away with, but he came to make sure that you could fulfill the covenant or the promises. So I don't say it's not true. I just kind of understand it, in the context in that day and time who they were talking about. And I understand that everybody that was writing in the Bible wasn't so sanctified and saved themselves. They had their own isms, such as Paul. He came into an area where women were speaking all out loud, and he wasn't used to that. Remember, he was a tax collector, a man of power, so he took issues with that. So he silenced the women. Put something on your head and hush. You know what I'm saying? So I put things in context. I kind of understood, what was happening in that day and time because that's what I was taught. This is going on in this day and time. It said about eating swine. It talks about blends being mixed. There was a reason why these people wrote those things. I don't think nobody in that day and time had any idea that it would be rolled forward in history to become the do's and don'ts of the world for those that subscribe to it. I live with a Buddhist. She don't subscribe to all that, but I never met a more balanced, believing, affirming person. And baby, she's a okay. That's where they're going now. Somebody else going to get their Gahanza today. She's going to do what they do, and I don't get all up in that. but I appreciate it. So you got this big Pentecostal woman here, and you got this Buddhist woman here, and you put them powers together, and God has blessed us. The universe has yielded favorably upon us. I got friends who've been foreclosed on. I got friends who have lost. I got friends who died. But God has been gracious enough to let me live comfortably. Now, I don't have everything I want, but you know what? I ain't broke right now. Right now, I ain't broke. The next week, I might be broke. But right now, today, I ain't broke. I used to sing that song. I let nothing separate me from the love of God. And I meant that thing. I never forget. This was like New Year's Eve night. That was a turning point for me. This girl had been working me. It was kind of cute. I was kind of liking it. But I said to God, I said, before I do this, I need to hear a sign from you real clear. Honey, all I can say is how the Lord spoke to me that night. I had been intimate with this woman, and we were laying there, and all of a sudden the radio popped on. It was my alarm clock. And guess what was playing? Oh, it is Jesus. Surely Caesar. I said, thank you. And I ain't never looked back. Now, can you believe that? Now, that's the gospel. That's the gospel, according to Darlene. So, again, I love Darlene's story, and she enjoys telling that story. And I love the fact that, she asked God for permission to get it on with her trick of the night. The next woman that whose narrative I'm going to share is Ida May. You talk about a character. Ida May is a real character because she is a professional storyteller. In fact, when I interviewed her, she was making her rounds to nursing homes to tell stories. She was born in a little town in Alabama called Odenville in 1961. And she is a commanding presence. She stands over 6 feet tall and has a voice that's lower than mine, so I actually can't affect her voice. She has quite a story. This particular story involves her shedding herself of women's clothing. I didn't want to teach because I didn't want to conform. The whole thing was killing me. This whole being a girl thing, My mom used to make me wear a long line bra. It's this bra you put on it come way down here back in the day. This was before Spanx, okay? They had these metal stays in it. Then you had that damn girdle on. It came down here from your waist down to here. It had a metal stays in it, and you had a zip on the side, and you had to suck it in. It was crazy. You know what I'm saying? But that was the way women dressed because there were no pantyhose. We had stockings. So we had them, we put them up and we hooked that to some shit. So it was like, I hate it. I just couldn't conform. I remember when I first went to Miles College, we used to always wear dresses. And I was a big girl all my life. I mean, really, I maxed out about 400, 350. I was a big girl. And I had these shifts. My mom would always buy shifts for me. And I remember standing out there in these little spoon heels. And I was so fat that the fat was sticking out on the side because, they had that little gap on the side. And they were squishing. There was squishing going on every time I take a step. It'd be like, that nylon would be like, shoo, 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 shoo. I was the most miserable person in freshman year of college. And I had no pants. My father did not allow us to wear pants, so I had no pants. So it was that shift every damn day with that long line girdle and bra. It was killing me. It was killing me. The kids in school started calling me church girl. And I didn't know that that's how they referred to me behind my back. Then one day I was sitting in front of the student union. I was sitting up there. I was so uncomfortable trying to read a book, just trying to fit in any goddamn way I could. Excuse my language. And I'm sitting there, and this guy came up beside me. And I still say he saved me. His name was Frederick. Everybody laughed or looked at or paid attention to Frederick because he had this perm hair. And he had this big head of hair and it was permed like a woman. He had this shirt and he had it tied and knot up on his titties. Then he had these cut off blue jeans and they were so short you could see the pockets. So he had these little sandals. He came up. Yeah, how you doing, church girl? I'm like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? I was some strange motherfucker walking around. So anyway, I met Frederick and sat down and he said, church girl, what you up to? I didn't pay no attention. I didn't say too much to him. Every day he would meet me there and we just developed a little friendship. So I got a job working work study and it was working with these kids outside. So I showed up at 4 o'clock to start my job and I had them shifts and the little teaspoon heels. Frederick said, where you going? I said, I come here. He said, oh, no, honey, we hitting balls and batting shit. You can't come out here. I said, well, I got no pants. He said, come on. So he took me to Kmart, bought me my first pair of books, bought me a shirt and a denim jacket. I went back to school. My titties were so free. When I was taking all that stuff off, he was like, ooh, he was just cutting up, Why you got all that shit? He was just cutting up. It turned out Frederick was my best friend. So again, I love Ida Mae, and I love that story of how she freed herself of the strictures of women's clothing, and as she said, let her titties go free. So the last story I'm going to share is from Duncan T. And Duncan is someone that I'm really, really close to now. He lives in Atlanta and has lived there for close to 30 years now as an activist, initially HIV/AIDS, and now doing a lot of activism around prostate cancer. And he is a diva extraordinaire. He would not tell me the exact year of his birth. He's very vain. But he was born in Kansas City, Missouri. He says sometime in the early 60s. I could guess when it was, but I won't. My interview with him took place in November of 2004. What has been the impact of HIV and AIDS on your life? How much shape you got left? I don't mean to be disrespectful to you in this project and your education or whatever, but that question is almost unfair. There are all these faces that I don't have time to name. I'll just name one, Crawford, who moved to Atlanta about the same time I did and helped me write an article that helped me start my career as an activist. Helped me write an article that shook up the Black gay community in such a way that they started attacking me, actually, which was fine. Well, it wasn't fine then, but it's fine now. But it said something about us, what we could do. It shook things up. And then behind the scene, I was involved with Black and white men together. And he's a writer. And we were such good friends, I could stare at the phone and go, Crawford's gonna call. And the phone would ring. Or I would go, I need Crawford to call me. And the phone would ring. We were connected. And he ain't here. That's the impact of AIDS on my life. Because that would be a 20-something year friendship. And multiply that by 100. And that's what AIDS has done to my life. So I don't know who I would be, because I would be different if Crawford were here. I moved here to get involved in Black theater, not to do AIDS education, not to become a Black gay activist. I was going to be a leader in the theater, honey. Y'all were going to pay to see me. I was going to take this to New York and do my show and go around the world and have dinner with Diana Ross. That's what I was going to do. Then we had to have this fucking epidemic. Yeah. There are all the conversations I never would have had with my parents, been hurt, mortally wounded by my peers had we not had AIDS. And some of that hurt our own community around this whole business of being out and black and gay and lesbian and what have you. It's about people's fear of losing their loved ones. And they didn't have a language for it. They didn't have a way of dealing with it. Because, we'd already lost, Big Mama to heart trouble or sugar or something else we weren't ready to talk about. And now you have this thing and it's killing white fast and he want us to talk about it? No. So what would the community have been like if we had never had AIDS? I mean, can you imagine the Broadway shows we would have had without AIDS that I would have been star of? I mean, we'd be wearing different clothes. If Willie Smith were alive now, child, please. I know I would be wearing Willie Smith now. At least I'd be able to afford Willie Smith now. Yeah. So how do you feel about the life choices that you've made in light of being a black gay man? My next door neighbor, who shall remain nameless, is Mexican American. His father, I think, is first generation, but I'm not sure. His wife is a white lady from the South. They have two beautiful children, and they've been very dear to me and David. But they just broke up. She moved to an apartment with the two children Saturday and Sunday. And so I was comforting a straight man who's coming to terms with what he's going to have to do to get his wife and children back. And whatever I've done, I've never ended up in that predicament. And I came home to my lover of 11 years tonight, and I've never been so fucking grateful that I don't have that level of hurt and needing to do something with my life to get it together. At least at this particular point in time, I'm having with at least the current decisions that I've made. Staying with David, being with David, going back to be with David, living with David, marrying David. All in opposition to all the stuff that I've been taught. Establishing a home with David. A home we welcome family into. I've had my cousins here. I've had my stepmother here, and they love him. Can't say I'm proud of their decision. But at least by some miracle, and I do mean it's a miracle because we weren't always insane, and we were popular and younger. But I've made some decisions that have allowed me to be negative of HIV, but yet still involved in the epidemic because my status has not prevented me from being infected and affected in other ways. Some say I might be crazy. I might say that someday. But I think the big decision early on around going ahead and being black and gay, not something else, but being black and gay, and going on from there was the big one that I'm most proud of. I have not suffered through a so-called marriage to a woman. We won't go into other things, but to a woman. And my relationships with men were honest relationships. They didn't work, but they were honest. And I've loved men as fully as I possibly could. And I feel like I've been blessed to do that. And I've loved women as a gay man, not as a straight man, but as a gay man. And I feel like I've been rewarded for that. And I lived a full life. If this tape were to get struck by lightning right now, and I were to accidentally get struck too, because it would be an accident, the memorial service is going to be humongous. Because I've accomplished a few things in this skin. And the program won't just focus on black and gay, but if you need to print in there, kind of sissified, a little soft around the edges, and occasionally a vicious Miss Thing, and sometimes in drag, and sometimes pretty in drag, and not just in drag. Wow, I'm glad you asked me that. I hadn't thought about that, and took whatever my faith was this week with me too, and hung on to that and questioned it. I don't need to be smothered by anything. So no, I have no regrets. Well, you see, I am black. I am gay. I am the South. This South. That's Duncan. So thank you all for letting me share some of the stories from both sweet tea and from honey pot. As you can see, all of these stories are wonderful. These people live full lives. They have a lot to contribute uh, to our community, and there's stories that don't often get told. And so I'm really fortunate and blessed to have been given a platform to help them share their stories um, with you and with the world. And so I'm ready for your questions.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. That was amazing, beautiful, powerful, all of the above. And I will say this again at the end of the program, but I want to say it now too. Just thank you so much for giving your time to be with us tonight. Your
Absolutely.
generosity means so much to us. So thank you for that. Um,
Absolutely.
I want to bring on our moderator for tonight's conversation. Let me get you on the screen here, Naomi. You are a blue Skype bubble at the moment, but I believe we will see you shortly, hopefully. Naomi, are you there? Well,
Yes.
in the meantime, I'm going to just go back to my own screen for a second here. No, I'm going to hold out here because I have a feeling Naomi will be joining any minute. And so we can see your face. Naomi, can we hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. We just can't see your
Okay,
face.
I'm trying to get the video back on. I'm not sure what's going on. Hold on one second.
Okay. Well, worst case scenario, you can just moderate a conversation benevolently from above. But hopefully we can see your face in the meantime.
Okay, I think
Um,
I'm there now.
I'm sorry?
Can you see me now? I think
No, I can't see you.
oh gosh.
Well, that's okay. It's okay because what I'm going to
Now,
do is
Okay, now.
let's see here. Yes, you're there. Yay, we can see you. Um, thank you. um, so let me give just a brief introduction, Naomi. I am grateful to know Naomi just a bit, and just from interactions and our work together across the state in different organizations. And so I want to briefly give an introduction, but allow Naomi to also just introduce herself to you and talk about some of the amazing stuff that she has going on right now. Naomi Simmons-Thorne is an award-winning scholar, activist, and local organizer based out of Columbia, South Carolina. Naomi has participated in and led numerous organizing efforts both within the state and the larger Southeast region. Her work focuses on Black LGBTQ plus communities and youth. And you are a recent USC graduate, right? Is that official yet?
I am, yes.
Yay, that's amazing. That's amazing. So congratulations, and I'm going to turn it over to you and then allow you to take it from there. Thank you so much
Oh,
for joining
wonderful.
us tonight.
Absolutely. And thanks again for inviting me to participate. And I know I got to speak to you a little bit before we actually went live, Dr. Johnson, but I just wanted to reiterate just how much of an honor and a pleasure it is to be having this conversation with you. So if you can see, like I'm wearing my like yellow and my
I
flowers, that's
duly
happenstance.
noted.
So
Duly
yes,
noted.
it's to represent the hive and hymen we're representing today for honeypot and the Black Southern queer women who love women. And so I've been kind of thinking about kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. And I think that honeypot, the book right here, is I've been ruminating with it and thinking so much about it. And so, forgive me, but most of my conversation, my questions are about Honeypot because it's
Yeah,
such a fascinating read.
that's fine.
This is also your latest book, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So, reading the back, the publisher like describes it as a work of creative nonfiction. And prior to reading the back, like that was one of my questions. I was thinking about, like, how do you categorize this? What is this? It felt like so new, and it felt like something that wasn't done before. Certainly the content was something that wasn't done before, but I also feel like methodologically, it was also something that I've just never seen before. And so there's almost like a bit of a, like, it's an enjoyable one, but it's almost like a bit of a learning curve. You got to learn how to read Honey Pot. I think a whole class could be taught on, like, how to actually read Honey Pot. It's a really great book. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Honey Pot, which is a creative approach you took from prior source material with oral interviews that you did for your book, Black Queer Southern Women, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And so this book, it has a structure for people who haven't read it yet, and I would highly encourage you to do so. This book has a structure where the oral interviews, rather than just reading transcriptions, the oral interviews come in as forms of revelation to the main character, who is journeying with this mythical figure named Miss B. And the oral interviews come to him as, like, kind of revelation throughout their, like, journey and their chronicle of Hymen, which is this fictional allegorical universe that I hope you'll talk a little bit more about as well. So the first question I want to ask you about these oral interviews and the book itself was whether you can tell us a little bit about the process of creating it, the creative process that it was involved in creating the book. And also, can you tell us a little bit about the allegorical significance of Hymen and the hive and honey to these stories?
Yeah. So thank you for that. I initially was going to write one book, not two, based on these interviews, but I wanted to do something a little creative, a little even more creative with Honey Pot than with Sweet Tea. So for Sweet Tea, the book itself is kind of a traditional oral history. And for Honey Pot, I wanted to do something different. But the first version of the book that I sent to my editor, well, first of all, it was over 1,000 pages. And he was like, no, we're not publishing that. But he also felt that the more creative, performative parts of the book didn't necessarily jive well with the more traditional academic parts. And upon his suggestion, he told me I should write two different books. One that was a more traditional oral history, and one that could be as creative and performative as I wanted. And so that's what I did. So Black Queer Southern Women is really the companion text to Sweet Tea. And then Honey Pot, it's its own thing. And one of the things that happened during these interviews was a lot of the women would make references to their honey pot. And, being a cisgender gay man, I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. I was like, oh, honey pot. And then I came to know about what a honey pot was. And interestingly enough, that sent me down this path, a rabbit hole really, of doing research on honey and the significance of honey. And it was really fascinating about the uses of honey, the fact that honey is the only food from an insect that humans eat. That, it's a preservative. It was used in Egyptian times to help in mummification, to preserve their bodies, that it's part of people's beauty regimen. I mean, honey can do so many things. And then, of course, there's the connection of honey to the South in terms of how Southerners use it on biscuits and glaze and so on and so forth. And then that led me to doing research on honeybees. And that became a whole other thing because I realized all of the connections between honeybees and the women that I were interviewing. like the fact that a hive of honeybees is comprised 90% of female worker bees, that the only male bees, who are called drones, and that's a whole other story, they're called drones, only their purpose in the hive is to impregnate the queen, and not the queen of that hive, but a queen from another hive. And then after they, or if they are successful in mounting a queen bee and inseminating her, the queen bee does this kind of aerial thing in the air to throw him off of her, taking along his genitals. And so he dies. And if he survives that and makes it back to the hive, the other female worker bees will kick him out. And then there are all of these connections between worker bees and the history of Black women, particularly in the South, because the worker bees do everything in the hive. They forage for food, they keep the hive clean, they take care of the larvae, they take care of the queen. So if you think about the labor history of Black women in the South, there are all these connections. And so the one thing that was really serendipitous is when I was looking at some of the scientific information about bees, bees belong to the insect order called Hymenoptera. And I'm like, this is just too much. So I was like, I have all the ingredients here for creating this wonderful world of hymen, which is the hive in which these women live. Miss B is the protector of hymen. No one may enter without her permission. Miss B is a trickster figure. So to your point about the approach, I wanted the relationship between Miss B and Dr. EPJ to be an allegory for some of the challenges that I experienced being a man conducting these stories with women. And so Dr. EPJ is part of me, but also not me, because there's some things that didn't happen that I just created. He's very arrogant. He's bougie. We do have that in common, actually. He thinks he knows everything. He has a lot of hubris. And Miss B checks him and checks his male privilege, checks his misogyny, checks his sexism, and so on and so forth. And so the whole journey is a journey of, as you described it, revelation when he's bearing witness to these stories, but it's also a journey of him finding out who he is and finding some humility about what he's been gifted by these women sharing their stories with him. And I had so much fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Writing this. And one of my favorite scenes is in the club scene where there's a ballroom showdown between Miss B and one of the queens from another hive. I think her name is she's from the House of Apocrypha. So, yeah.
I think probably my favorite interview that you did was with it was an artist from Anderson, South Carolina Blue.
Blue.
Yes. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah. So that's an interesting story because when I interviewed Blue, so Blue was assigned female at birth, and when I interviewed them, they were still presenting as female. But then after the interview, they transitioned, and at the end of their interview, they said, I'm a poet, and I have this poem I want to share with you. And the poem was called Pussy Juice. and very explicit. And I, I was clutching all kinds of pearls. But it was a great thing to include for the club scene because it fit right in because that chapter is all about sexuality. But yeah, I like Blue's story too.
One of the things I also really liked about Honey Pot was your approach at world building and creating a universe for like these stories to live in and for just this permanent home for the people that you interviewed. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I was wondering just in terms of this world, Hyman, kind of just like um is this a place that that lives for you, independent of the context of the book? And also, how do you think about Hyman in relation to other Black queer universes? I'm thinking about some of the world building of like Octavia Butler, Samuel Delany, and others.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did want to evoke another spiritual plane with the book, and part of that was driven by the fact that I met so many women who were practicing non-Western religion like Yoruba, and I also, was inspired by people like Octavia Butler and Samuel Delany, who engage in speculative fiction and science fiction. And this might sound strange, but when I was writing Honey Pot, I felt like I had to be inside that world to describe it. So some of it for me was written in a dream state. Of course, I was awake, but I let my imagination go to another place, such that I was just sort of allowing the world to come to me rather than me trying to contrive it. And in that sense, yes, I do feel like Hyman exists in this other place. And hopefully, when people read the book, they will allow themselves to have that experience, because I don't think that you necessarily should approach Honey Pot for trying to understand everything as much as wanting to have an experience. If that makes sense.
I think, Chase, did you say that we had Dr. Johnson until 7? Because I was going to be respectful of time, because it's 7 now. If so, I have one more question.
Well, I don't. Yes, we have him until 7 o'clock our time. Dr. Johnson, not to put you on the spot, but can we ask you one more question?
Oh, okay, wonderful. All right, wonderful. Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay. All right, wonderful. So I wanted to actually introduce a quote from the book. And so this quote, it's an excerpt, and this is Ms. B in conversation with Dr. EPJ. And so Ms. B says, "We'll stop here for now while some folks are away getting lunch. This way I can give you an aerial view." And she's talking to Dr. EPJ. And then Dr. EPJ says, "But why isn't anyone speaking?" And Ms. B responds, "Oh, they're talking. You just have to tune into their frequency in order to hear what they're saying." And when I read that, for me, that was such a metaphor of what it meant to be a Black queer Southerner, to be a Black queer woman in the South, because it's like we have these networks, these communities, these organizations, these histories, but to so many people, they can't see them or they're invisible. It's hard for them to tap into. And I was also thinking about that in relation to an anecdote you shared in your famous, now landmark 2005 text, Black Queer Studies, where you said in the preface, I want to say, you talked about how the impetus from the book came from a Black Queer Studies conference that happened, I think, in the year 2000 in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And that made me think back to that because to me, that's like as historic of a moment as the 1960 meeting in North Carolina at Shaw University that led to the formation of SNCC. But that story of that Black Queer Studies conference that happened in the year 2000 that led to what is now a landmark text, Black Queer Studies, which has given, birth to so many of us Black Queer scholars and Black Queer Studies scholars, not as well, very much so like what Ms. B says, like, if you don't have that frequency, it's hard to like know that these things are happening. So I was wondering if you can speak a little bit about what it meant to be both hyper visible and invisible at the same time growing up in North Carolina, and also how you think like visibility and invisibility has changed, if it has, do you think, for Black queer Southerners?
Yeah, I mean, materially, some things have changed. One of the statistics that is always very interesting to me is the number um, of adoptions, gay adoptions, are biggest in the South and among queers of color. That's really fascinating to me because, as everyone knows, there are still many states in the country that won't allow same-sex couples to adopt. Um, so, certain attitudes, of course, have shifted over time, but we do still, exist in a kind of hyper visibility because there are certain chosen ones that are put on a pedestal as representative, while other voices are still marginalized. So you have the exceptions that get focused on, and not everyday folk. And I love one of the reasons why I do the work that I do, because I think everyday folk are theorists. My mother was a philosopher. My grandmother, sure enough, was a philosopher, and they were responsible for my career. And so it's really interesting to be to hold different identity markers that are constantly shifting from context to context that make you visible, invisible. Sometimes my Blackness and my queerness are at odds with each other. Sometimes they come together. Sometimes my class status is more prevalent. So, one's visibility or invisibility is in constant flux. In the South in particular, I think that the voices of queers of color in particular are not always as elevated as others. Those stories are not as prevalent as others. And I think about, for instance, my whole impetus for doing both of these books was because we had some gay histories, but they were very white, but also coast centric. San Francisco. So yes, it's better, but also in some ways it's worse. And I don't know if we'll ever get to a place where the two things will be in sync, where I won't just be visible when it's convenient, or be invisible when it's inconvenient. I think it's an ongoing process.
And also within the book, like, one of the things I love is how you kind of cordon things off into sections and group stories by these kind of themes. And during the club scene, of course, which is so dynamic, so powerful, I think it's during the club scene, we also, in addition to what up to then have been mostly lighthearted and jovial stories, we also start to encounter more traumatic stories about sexual abuse and sexual assault. And I wanted to know, and you also spoke about reflexivity, about being a cisgender gay man coming into this space and being so welcomed by the women who were so willing to give these stories to you. I wanted to know, just kind of for you, what did it feel like to be entrusted with those stories? And also just if you could speak a little bit more to what it means to like hold space for Black queer women.
Yeah, we talk a lot about in our community, the queer community, broader queer community, about allyship. But allyship is hard. And no matter how, good-willed we are, we need to take our cues from the people to whom we're trying to be an ally. And sometimes we fail at that, but when we fail, we need to be gracious and not become defensive when we get called out about us being a bad ally. And be self-reflexive about it. And again, take our cues from the people that we're trying to be an ally to. So for me, interviewing these women, particularly about sexual trauma and sexual assault, was a very humbling, but also very disturbing process for me, bearing witness to them over and over again, but also holding that in my own feelings, holding that intention with the fact that I actually am implicated because of my maleness in some of that violence. And that was hard for me, when I'm trying to be sympathetic, but also understanding that that's not my experience and the ways in which I'm implicated. So one of the things I tried to do in the book was represent that tension. So as you know, there's the moment when Bo Willie Drone has attacked one of the women, and the women create this circle around them, and Dr. EPJ is not permitted to join the circle, and has to bear witness to these stories and not be comforted. Miss B stings him. It's like, get yourself to pull it tight. So that was me trying to kind of represent that tension of what it means to be an ally, what it means to be an ally who's not, who doesn't know everything, who needs to step back when it's time to step back, and who needs to step up when it's time to step up. And it's interesting. When I first started telling people that I was going to start interviewing women for this book, they were like, "Well, I don't think you're going to get women to talk to you because I'm a man." And that was not the case at all. As you know, they shared with me and shared intimate parts of their lives. But part of that was me, I think, had to do with they most of them knew about Sweet Tea, had read those stories, and had seen my performances. B, I'm not the most masculine of men. C, I have a particular kind of empathetic style of listening to people and not being afraid of silence when they're telling their stories. So I think all of that helped when I was interviewing, particularly around sexual trauma.
Another one of the questions I had about the book, which was more so just about the collection of the oral interviews more generally, but one of my like little nerdy geeky things about having read this book is that I have been keeping page with my Alice Walker bookmark. And so I was actually a little curious about that. So I'm actually new. I know personally one of the people that you interviewed, Sangador, and I know of people who are really good friends with another person you interviewed, which was one of the co-founders of the organization Southerners on New Ground. And so I was curious if like, was it a intentional thing that you didn't like interview some of like, the more famous or high profile Black queer women from the South that we all know, like Alice Walker and others?
Now, I tried, in fact, I with Alice Walker in particular, I reached out to her assistant to get her to write a foreword for the book. And as you know, for the book, a lot of the book is inspired by her work. You'll see a little bit of color purple in there.
Mm-hmm.
And Zora Neale Hurston is a big influence on me, and you'll see some of her work in there. Toni Morrison, of course. But no, I tried. One of the people I wanted to interview was Nikki Finney, fellow South Carolinian.
Mm-hmm.
But because she was writing her own book, she declined. So no, I tried. I tried to get some of those.
She wrote one of the reviews on the back. Nikki
Yes,
Finney did,
yes,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
absolutely, yes, yeah.
So I guess my last question is, how do you think about honeypot in your corpus, in your bibliography? What kind of position does it occupy? And also, what what kind of life do you anticipate and would you like to see for honeypot in the coming decades when even younger scholars and other readers are starting to engage it?
Well, I hope that one of the things that'll help its longevity is that beautiful cover. And I have to give a shout
Here
out
it
to
is,
the
people.
artist. Yes,
Beautiful.
Jamia Richmond Edwards, who graciously allowed us to use her cover. And the title of the artwork is "Wings Not Meant to Fly," which I think is so appropriate for this. And also, I saw it on someone did a snapshot of their television when they were watching the final episode of Empire, because Andre, the eldest son, had the picture on over his fire mantle. I was like, oh my God. But seriously, I hope that people again come back to Honeypot over and over again, because I think each reading will render something different.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're different forms. As you know, sometimes words are like on a different spread out on the page. It's not linear. There's song in it. There's music. There's mysticism. There's all this stuff in it. So I think one reading is not enough. Which I hope that keeps it fresh and people coming back to it. I want to see a performance created about based on Honeypot. I don't think that I will create the performance, but I'd love to see someone adapt it for the stage, for instance. I could even see it as a film. So if anybody's out there listening who's a filmmaker, please reach out. Ava DuVernay. So I hope that the book actually for the next generation opens up a space of creativity for them, particularly younger scholars who are looking for a different way to communicate scholarship. It's not the traditional way. And I want to thank Duke University Press for taking a risk on this book, because it is not your traditional academic book at all. In fact, it's not, I don't think, for academics. It's for a different audience. So But most of all, I just hope the stories live on, and I think they will because they're such powerful, powerful stories.
Well, before I give it back over to Chase, I just wanted to thank you once again for your work and everything that you've done, all of the amazing books that you've authored and edited and co-edited. Your bibliography is so important and has given life um, and sense to so many of us younger scholars who are coming up now thinking about the things that you've written and using them for theses and dissertations and just all kind of things. You've really paved the way. You've also helped to bridge. You've been a really important bridge for a lot of people in terms of people who we never would have known about, who've like died in the AIDS epidemic, bridging those folks and those stories from that time to now. I'm thinking specifically Marlon Riggs, who we never would have known about if you didn't cite him and include him. And just thank you so much for all of the amazing work that you have published. And I am looking forward to getting more books signed in the future and running into you at your performances and following you all around the country and reading anything else that you come out with.
Oh, thank you. I do want to say thank you for picking up the mantle, for doing the work that you do. It's so important. It's so very, very important. And particularly in my home region, the South. It's very courageous, it's very brave, and thank you for doing that work. I also will put out a plug for a documentary that is now on the festival circuit. Making Sweet Tea is out now, and it actually will be screened this weekend in through a North Carolina festival called Longleaf Film Festival. If you go to Longleaf Film Fest, or you Google Longleaf Film Festival, you'll see our film. It's going to be screened on Friday and Saturday virtually, but only on Friday and Saturday. So if you want to see,
Oh yeah, I definitely have to tune in for that then.
yeah, so if you want to see Duncan and Freddie and others, tune in to Making Sweet Tea.
All right. Thank you all both so much. Naomi, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation and just lending your voice to this and your brilliance. And Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for joining us as well and for giving your time and for making such beautiful work and art and sharing that with us tonight and your words are just powerful. And so thank you for that. I'm going to wrap this up and just do a little housekeeping as we close. The like I said, this is sort of a new line of programming for AFA. We are going to continue along this path though, and are excited to be able to continue to do some different programs. We have a program coming up next Wednesday, the 13th. We're partnering with GLAD, the organization GLAD, and going to be presenting an Advocacy 201. We did a 101 about a few weeks ago, and we talked about just the basics of legislative process and having conversations with policymakers and basic things like that around advocacy and lobbying. And we're going to take the next step and talk about using your personal story to create change. And so our friends from GLAD are coming in. They're going to talk about where to pull, what parts of your story to pull in, and creating an elevator pitch that you can use anytime you're in front of someone who's a change maker and you've got 2 minutes to tell them what they need to hear and why it's important to you, and they're going to help us craft our own personal stories. And then on May 20th, I'm really excited about this program. We have DeLeslin George Warren from the Catawba Indian Nation, joining us. We're going to talk about his personal story as a queer artist living on the reservation, and his story about right now, what's going on in the Catawba Indian Nation right now in this moment, struggling through the COVID-19 crisis, how it's impacting their community directly. So with that, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you again to our guests, Dr. E. Patrick Johnson and Naomi Simmons-Thorne. Thank you both again for joining us, and thank you all for joining us. I hope to see you again soon. Please take care. Thanks so much.